I want to marry Steve, a doctor, so please divorce him, old lady. One day, a young woman suddenly came to our house and said that the nightclub worker, who is 12 years younger than me, leaned on my husband Steve's arm. That's fine. But there's one condition. I smiled sweetly and looked at the two of them. I'll submit the divorce papers in front of you. So, will you two submit your marriage registration in front of me? The two, who had been dumbfounded, smiled scornfully and accepted. Trying not to burst out laughing, the three of us headed to the law office first. I am Cindy Holmes, 33 years old, and work at a certain hospital. My husband, Steve, of the same age, also works at the same hospital, and we had a workplace marriage. We don't often have days off together because we both have night shifts, and we haven't had children yet. Previously, both my parents and my in-laws mentioned wanting grandchildren, but now they seldom do. Since we are both busy and there are sudden calls, they seem to think that as long as I work at this hospital, having grandchildren is impossible. I feel a bit guilty towards our parents, but I find my current job very fulfilling. Steve also likes his current job and occasionally participates in skills improvement seminars. Therefore, his hard work at the hospital is well regarded, and we have been living busy but fulfilling days. The reason I started to have complaints about Steve began when the rules we set when we got married started to be disregarded. Initially, since we both have demanding jobs, we clearly set some rules regarding household chores. One of those was, the one who is not on night shift does the housework. It is because the one who is on night shift tends to be exhausted. Both Steve and I have irregular night shifts, making it difficult to share household chores by day or type. Therefore, we decided to base it on whether one has night shifts or not. When I had a night shift, Steve used to cook simple meals and do the cleaning and laundry. However, recently, even when he's not on night shift, he's often out at night. Hey, haven't you been leaving the house more often even when you're not on night shift? Oh, yeah. Sorry, there have been many seminars lately. I guess the instructor likes me. He keeps inviting me out for drinks. I initially refused, but you can't keep saying no. Once I accepted, I kept getting invited. Sorry, I'll ask him to reduce the frequency. Indeed, at this time, the hospital was conducting various seminars, some of which invited external instructors. Remembering this, I gently tapped his shoulder. That's fine, it means they expect a lot from you, right? Besides, the seminar will only last about 2 more weeks. Don't worry about home and just do your best. Thanks, that helps. Steve is a good listener and I always end up talking about various things. That's why it makes sense that the instructors liked him. He said he would pay for the drinking sessions out of his allowance, but at that pace, he would run out of money quickly. So I decided to pay for the drinking sessions from our living expenses for another 2 weeks. For the next 2 weeks, Steve started going out at night every time there was a seminar. Even after the seminars ended, his night outings continued. When I thought he might be having night shifts, a veteran cleaning lady told me otherwise. Dr. Holmes hardly has night shifts recently. We'd prefer to leave it to the young men since there are many elderly here. Apparently, he continued to go out at night even when he wasn't scheduled for night shifts. Just when I felt suspicious and was about to confront him, my schedule suddenly became very busy, leaving me no time to question him. When my hectic schedule finally eased, I no longer thought about confronting Steve. I just wanted to go home and sleep in bed. Exhausted, when I returned home from a night shift, there were unfamiliar high heels in our home. I'm home. Steve, is there a guest? Welcome back. Sorry for the suddenness, but there's something I need to talk about. When I went to the living room, there was an unfamiliar woman sitting next to him on the sofa. The woman, who looked about college age, was clinging to Steve's arm. Can I put my bag in my room? Yeah, that's fine. But I want you to hurry, if possible. The atmosphere clearly wasn't good, so I sighed and went to put my bag in the room. I returned to the living room still in my work clothes and sat directly across from Steve and the woman. This is our first meeting, isn't it? So, what do you need from me today? Nice to meet you. I'm Emma. I came today because I want you, old lady, to divorce Steve. I was more annoyed by her childish way of speaking than by her calling me an old lady. While holding my throbbing head, I looked at Steve, who momentarily faltered but then firmly met my gaze. Emma works at the nightclub I visited with the instructor. She's a college student working part-time to pay for her tuition, and she's really earnest. A college student? No offense, but how old are you? Are you even an adult? I'm 21 years old. That makes me 12 years younger than you, Auntie. That's hilarious. I gave up on retorting what was so funny and glared at Steve. So, you cheated on me when I was busy, and now you want to divorce me to be with a younger girl, is that right? Why do you have to put it in such bad terms? I just want to take care of Emma for the rest of my life. You can live on your own, but she needs me. Wow, you are so cool. I sighed as the two began to get cozy arm in arm right in front of me. Steve was completely smitten with Emma, finding everything she said adorable, which was incredibly irritating. When I called Emma by her name, she looked at me with a triumphant grin. Do you really want to marry this man? Even if you get married, he's the type to keep going to nightclubs and spouts nothing but pretentious nonsense. He's the kind of man who believes all the sales talk. Won't you regret it? Of course, I want to marry him. After all, Steve is a doctor and earns a lot. That's terrible to say, it's all nonsense. He promised he won't go to nightclubs after marrying me. We're in love, so it'll be fine. Steve then hugged her, visibly moved, and they retreated into their own world again. I looked at him with dismay, but our eyes never met. All right, if you two have decided, I'll grant you a divorce. But there's one condition. What's the condition? Oh, you mean division of property? I shook my head at his words and smiled sweetly at them. We're going to the law office now. After Steve and I submit our divorce papers, then next, I want you, Steve and Emma, to submit your marriage registration to the city office, just in front of me. That's all. The two were stunned by my words, but soon stood up, delighted, realizing that was all. At the law office, Steve and I first submitted our divorce papers. Then I asked the lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings as soon as possible in order to enable Steve to remarry Emma quickly. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized at last. The three of us headed to the city office, and Steve and Emma filled out the marriage registration, and I signed as a witness. I helped Emma, handing over her driver's license to the clerk. People around there gazed at me, which made me uncomfortable. The atmosphere of an ex-wife helping her former husband's new wife with the paperwork was uncomfortably conspicuous, and the clerk's eyes darted around. I felt a bit sorry, but I was too pleased with myself. I then went straight home, took all my belongings, and moved them to my parents' house. I hadn't shopped much due to my busy schedule, so I only took valuables and clothes, leaving the household items behind. I packed everything into a suitcase and moved by car within a day. When I got to my parents' house, they were furious with Steve, but I calmed them down with a smile. Don't worry, I'm not just going to let this go. I'll make sure they both get what they deserve. 3 days later, I was called to the hospital reception. There's a woman here demanding to see you, Dr. Holmes. What should I do? Please direct her to an available room. I'll come as soon as I finish with my current patient. When I arrived at the designated meeting room, Emma was there, as I had expected. Seeing me in my white coat, she widened her eyes in surprise. Hello, I'm Dr. Holmes, an internist. I've managed to spare 5 minutes between consultations, so let's make this quick, shall we? What do you mean? He wasn't a doctor, and you are, huh? She was panicking, but there was no time to calm her down. I told her with a smile. It's true that Steve works at this hospital, but he's a janitor. He's an important staff member responsible for everything from cleaning to disinfecting. What? He tricked me. She slammed her hand on a desk and started muttering complaints about him. You did listen back then, right? I told you Steve is a man who only brags and spouts nonsense. It's going to be tough, but good luck with your life from now on. You're joking. If he's not a doctor, I don't need such an old man. I waved my hand at her, who looked like she was about to explode, and left the meeting room. I could hear her trying to stop me, but I rushed back to the consultation room. I fist-bumped a nurse who knew the situation, caught my breath, and then called in the next patient. Later, Emma found Steve working at the hospital and demanded a divorce. As Emma shouted that there was no point in marrying him if he wasn't a doctor, he yelled back that love doesn't care about occupation. The spectacle of their argument was witnessed by the patients waiting for consultations and the nurses, quickly spreading throughout the hospital. Even the whispers of the people around them didn't reach the heated pair, and the situation escalated until security had to intervene. Just before the police were called, Emma fled the hospital, and Steve chased after her. When Emma got home, she screamed that she wanted a divorce and would take the house, also demanding property division. This caused a level of noise that disturbed the neighbors. Around the time our divorce became known in the hospital, I filed for property division against Steve. Whether the certified mail reached them or not, Steve and Emma soon came to my parents' house. What do you mean by claiming property division? You didn't set any conditions other than me remarrying Emma. Why are you claiming it now? They barged into the house and ranted, not caring that my parents were there. Because, Steve, you cheated while we were married, and Emma, you knew he was married and still had an affair, right? So, of course, what goes around comes around. Emma, you could help him pay that money. Don't mess with me. I did nothing wrong, and I definitely won't pay. Are you that desperate for money? Even becoming a doctor hasn't cleaned up your greedy attitude. Despite Emma and Steve's yelling, it didn't bother me at all. Do you know why I included your remarriage as a condition for our divorce? They looked puzzled and frowned. One reason is, I wanted everyone to see that Steve switched to another woman while still married to me. Normally, divorcing and remarrying right away is like saying the new spouse is the affair partner. Well, even if I didn't do that, you two made enough noise at the hospital for everyone to know. The other reason is, I wanted to make sure I could get property division from you. I thought Emma was just your stage name, and I didn't know where you worked or what kind of person you were. That's why I had you fill out the marriage registration and helped with the process all the way. Thanks to that, I got to see all your identification documents and proofs. You know, you have to change the address on your driver's license when you get married, right? While Steve grimaced, her face turned increasingly pale. So, I'll leave the rest to my lawyer. You can try to dodge or run away, but don't forget that I have all your personal information. For Emma, who works as a nightclub worker, protecting her personal information is crucial to avoid being easily identified or stalked. As I smiled, Emma fled with loud footsteps. Steve, left stunned, clicked his tongue at me and then chased after her. I sighed in relief as my house finally quieted down, calming my furious parents. After that, Emma has been steadily paying the part of the property division. Considering she's a college student, I presented a small amount, which she will likely finish paying within the year. Emma seems to want a divorce, but Steve is resisting, and she doesn't have the means to hire a lawyer for divorce negotiations. So, although they can't divorce, they are living separately. Ultimately, Emma is also to blame for believing that Steve was a doctor just because she saw the same last name on the hospital's directory. Even though she's still a college student, working in customer service should have taught her to draw clear lines between customers and employees. Maybe a well-paying doctor seemed like an ideal marriage partner for a young woman, but getting involved with a married man was inexcusable. This incident has taught her a painful lesson about the consequences of recklessly destroying someone's family. As for Steve, he disappeared from the hospital without me having to do anything. In fact, after he left the hospital to chase Emma, he was in the middle of his shift. Therefore, the veteran janitor, who is Steve's boss, was furious. Her face red with anger, she wrote. Left work without permission due to a romantic dispute. In big letters on his shift schedule. This news quickly spread to other janitors who were off that day. The uproar became hot news among the staff, and patients spread their versions of the story. As a result, Steve, maligned and ostracized, eventually broke down when no one would even return his greetings. One day, he abruptly resigned. Later, he returned to his parents' home, where his father, already informed of the situation, gave him a severe reprimand. Although Steve didn't apologize, his mother transferred the full amount of the property division I had requested, so I decided not to worry about it any further. In the hospital, I received approaches from male doctors and nurses who heard I was now single. However, I've declined all offers, thinking I'm not ready for marriage just yet. I continue to work as an internist, busy but dedicated to each patient I see.